yeah, I mean, I've been really straight up about the fact that I feel betrayed, to be honest with you.
Darleen Tana has resigned from the Greens, but not from Parliament, leading to talk of what's known as the waka jumping law, allowing a party to request an MP be booted out. It's legislation created by New Zealand First, and Winston Peters says the Greens should use it against Tana.
Who they say should not be there, not fit, well then put it to the test right here, right now, by forcing her to resign.
For the Greens, it's complicated. The party was born after Jeanette Fitzsimons and Rod Donald ditched the alliance, so they hate the waka jumping law.
So there you go. Now, Gareth, maybe we can start. Should we start there, or should we start with talking about Darleen Tana? Why don't we just quickly go over what is the waka jumping law, and is this a place that the Greens could or would use it?
You want to go right back to the start?
Sure. We're here. Yeah. We're waiting. All ears.
Well, I mean, so when we moved electoral systems in the 90s to MMP in 96, there was a huge amount. 22 MPs were switching parties in the run up to that, and it was deeply unpopular with the public, right? Because it looked like rats leaving sinking ships and all of that. Right. So in the early 2000s, Jim Anderton was the prime driver of it. Winston Peters was a big supporter because he had a whole bunch of MPs defect in the Jenny Shipley, Jim Bolger government. But it was Jim Anderton who really strove to get this made into law, and it became a law in 1999, but it had a sunset clause. It automatically expired in 2005. Back then, and when I was living down south, I wrote a history of the Green Party and a biography of the first co-leader, the late Jeanette Fitzsimons, and I read all the speeches they were going through Parliament at that time, and the Greens were staunch opponents of this waka jumping. I call it party hopping because why we racialize, waka jumping and make that a bad thing. So I call it party hopping. They were vocally opposed to it because what they saw it was sort of domineering leaders like Jim Anderton and Winston Peters who wanted to get their way, wanted to dominate the caucuses. And they were opposed to it because it stifles free speech of MPs. We've already got some of the most powerful the most powerful parties in a democracy in the Western world at the moment. There's very little crossing the floor, very little examples of MPs speaking out, and that's exactly what waka jumping encourages. So Alamein Kopu was the victim of this in, I think, 2003, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. Tariana Turia also faced it when she set up the Māori Party, but it lapsed, right? And then it wasn't until 2018 when Winston Peters got it back in there that the Greens ended up actually voting for it, despite calling it a dead rat. And now we're sort of in this position where the Greens are considering invoking, or at least not ruling it out. But this is after decades of opposition to it and not using it last term with Elizabeth Kerekere when they had the opportunity.
So it can be used. The question is, will it be used? And as you say, the Greens haven't been a fan of it in the past. I guess a lot of that comes back. Now we go to the full circle to Darleen Tana and what she's done. It's a fascinating part of the political world that someone who has not got an electorate seat can get brought into Parliament on a list, then be, for want of a better word, kicked off that list, and then just become an independent and stay in government. I guess two sides. You want to be able to protect people from not just going, oh, by the way, we don't like you, you're off the list and you're out of Parliament. But this would be the other side of that coin, which seems a bit peculiar as well.
Yeah, and I acknowledge there is another side of the coin. And it's something Jeanette Fitzsimons used to always say. You can't actually legislate for your legislators to have integrity. You have to kind of depend on their conscience and the public pressure. So, look, even if the Greens didn't invoke it and Tana hypothetically stayed as an independent MP, I can't think of a more horrific life that Tana would experience. I saw that with Brendan Horan, who defected from New Zealand First. Recently, we saw Gaurav Sharma from Labour. These are kind of really deeply sad, isolated individuals who kind of don't do anything. And then they get all the flack from the media for taking the salary, but not really doing much. And you can't really achieve much as an independent in the circumstances that, say, Tana or Brendan Horan entered. So, look, I wouldn't wish that lifestyle on my worst enemy.